Here is the Prime Minister of Australia.
As long as they don't touch Mad as Hell, I'm happy.
Hello, good evening and welcome. Well, I assumed it was going to be both disappointing and boring when I tuned in last night, so I switched over from Channel 7 to the budget instead. Now, expectations were high, and no wonder, with the Treasurer hyping it up this last week to what can only be described as a fever pitch.
The budget is all about jobs, getting Australians back to work, backing families, backing small businesses, backing job creation and employment.
Now, having whipped us all up into that sort of frenzy, it was, of course, a tall order for Josh to deliver. So he didn't bother and he just read out the budget in a flat, stumbling monotone. As for content, though, are we now, as promised by the government in April of last year, back in black? Well, yes, we are, in terms of clothing at least, because we're all going to the funeral of the budget surplus. It's sad and we'll never see its like again. And I understand the surplus will be cremated and the ashes scattered in Matthias Cormann's ashtray. In budgetary terms, then, red is the new black, and I think it's going to be in fashion for some time. Now, I don't want to go through the budget in any great detail because we recorded this show last night before Josh delivered it, and frankly, you know a lot more about it than we do. But one of the great things the government's doing to aid economic recovery in this country is removing excessive regulation, something they obviously started doing several years ago in aged care. And you only need to take a quick look at the aged care sector to be doing more than the aged care regulator does. So well done there. But what regulations need to be removed to help pay off a budget deficit of $270 billion and a government debt of $1.5 trillion? Well, obviously, to encourage us all to be more financially sensible, we need to get rid of things like responsible lending laws. As Josh says,
we are moving from a lender beware model to a borrower responsibility model.
And that's a great idea because the last people you want to be taking financial responsibility are the banks. We need to spend as much money as possible as quickly as we can. Of course, it's all very well to borrow money we might not be able to pay back, but what happens when we get into trouble? Don't worry, it's sorted.
Small businesses at risk of collapse have been thrown a lifeline with new rules that will enable them to stay open while bankrupt.
And fair enough too. If the government can stay open now it's bankrupt, then why not small business? Still, this is not just about us wildly spending money we don't have. The Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, has also pledged $1.5 billion of our non-existent money to sustain local manufacturing, much in the way that you might give mouth-to-mouth resuscitation to a skeleton. The money will be spent in 6 priority areas. Spokesperson for what's left of the Finance Department, Darius Horsham, what are these priority areas, if anything?
Well, they're not for anything you make here at the ABC, I can tell you that much. It's like Scott says, it's all about alignment across different levels of government and with industry and the research and education sectors.
Well, reading between the lines, because the actual lines are just meaningless folderol,
sure.
Is this just an excuse to gut university sectors that don't match coalition ideology?
Well, it's all about alignment, and if our manufacturing plan can align with the overall culture war, then it could really cut down on double handling.
Aren't you worried there won't be enough Liberal donors to take advantage of these grants?
Shaun, don't shit on my leg and tell me it's a wombat for the Prime Minister to cuddle in a photo opportunity. This is about creating jobs.
Well, what do you say to people who claim that $1.5 billion over 10 years is not actually that much money? For example, it's only 1.5 sports rorts programs a year and only slightly more in total than the defence budgets blew out by last year.
Your point being?
Well, shouldn't the government manufacturing plan go above and beyond what they'd normally inject into projects through run-of-the-mill graft and incompetence?
Hello, McFly, anybody home? This is just the initial announcement. Don't think this can't also blow out when you include consultant fees, unexpected overruns, lobbying from vested interests, etc. Not to mention the hundreds of millions that will be injected into the economy via the companies that print out the banners for Scott to stand in front of when we announce the same program again and again with a slightly different name over the next 2 years. Plus, if we're lucky, we'll get the department who bought that airport land in on the deal. They'll pay 10 times too much for no readily apparent reason.
All right, now, last night was Matthias Cormann's last budget. Is he disappointed that it couldn't have been a better one?
No, I don't know.
It's not what Paul Keating would describe as a beautiful set of numbers, is it?
I liked them.
And Kevin Rudd would probably call them shithouse.
There were lots of noughts.
Well, despite the massive deficit, though, Labor has been urging you to maintain JobKeeper and JobSeeker at their higher levels. Why won't you?
Labor just want us to get into more and more debt, so it's less likely they'll ever be criticised when it's their turn to ruin the economy.
Well, doesn't their opinion count for something, though? I mean, they're far more experienced at managing deficits in the coalition because they're more experienced at creating them.
Every time we lose government, we hand them a surplus. Every time they lose government, they hand us a deficit. It's like renting out your home for a couple of years and coming back to find out it's been turned into a crack house without the advantage of finding some crack left behind that you can take to make the repair process more enjoyable.
And finally, Darius, as Matthias Cormann is leaving politics, and this will be your last time on the show, we've arranged for someone very special to say goodbye.
Hi, Darius. Matthias here to wish you all the very best for your future.
Thanks.
If you're writing your memoirs and you need someone to record the audiobook for you,
Yes?
I'm available.
Oh, come on, don't be ridiculous. You sound nothing like me.
Well, that makes two of us.
What are you going to do, by the way? You've always said you are not a commentator. Personally, I think that would make you perfect for Sky News After Dark. What do you say?
Nah, I think I might fly some choppers in Esperance. You could help me write the book of Cormann if you're interested.
Really? You want me to help you?
Yeah, Christopher Pine pulled out at the last minute.
Oh, I don't know. Is that really me?
Come with me if you want to live.
Affirmative. Hasta la vista, Shaun.
But let's ignore our hip pocket for a moment and look at something mentioned in last night's budget that actually matters. Yes, it's something we've always been banging on about here at the ABC, and something I think that could do with a little bit of plain speaking. At last, some hope, with the budget confirming a $61 million environment and heritage package. Now, I know what you're thinking. That sounds like a lot of money. After all, I mean, it's almost double what they gave Foxtel back in 2017. And the environment doesn't even have women's sport. But before you start banging on about those hippies in the coalition picking winners again by ensuring the Earth maintains its monopoly on habitability, Environment Minister Susan Ley has made it very clear that this money is aimed fairly and squarely at recreational fishers, ecotourism operators, bushfire-affected communities, upgrading the Townsville Aquarium, redeveloping huts along the Overland Track in Tasmania, and of course, everybody...
Creating jobs!
So maybe aimed was the wrong word. But by spraying the money all around things that aren't actually the environment, maybe some of the runoff will, like toxic pesticide flowing into a mountain stream, eventually find its way into the environment, where it will, as Susan put it,
spruce up our world and national heritage places.
Exactly, because in terms of the environment, all that's really needed is a bit of spit and polish and the place will be basically fine. Although I'm not sure that spruce is the right word, given that it's an introduced species and probably shouldn't be in our national parks. Still to come, the ABC greets Cardinal George Pell in Rome.
We hate you! We hate you!
And Qantas CEO Alan Joyce talks to a giant reporter.
Great news for people looking for jobs, and it's great news for the tourism industry.
Well, with some shipping containers not being unloaded on our docks...
The Prime Minister hasn't ruled out sending in the army to resolve an ongoing industrial dispute at ports around the country.
Although if that works out like it did with the hotel quarantine, we'll end up sending in half-asleep private security guards. But we don't want this turning into another 1998 waterfront dispute. First, because the ABC can't afford to make another series like Bastard Boys, hailed by critics like Prime Minister John Howard as, and I quote, one of the most lopsided pieces of political propaganda I've seen on the national broadcaster, which is why the ABC can't afford to make another series of it. And second, because this time round, we don't have the calming, mediating influence of Peter Reith. But the Maritime Union is simply seeking a wage increase. So in my typical lefty ABC way, I do wonder whether Patrick's terminals are just being a little bit mean here and denying it.
Employer Patrick says waterside workers average $160,000 a year plus $20,000 super for 35 hours a week, 40 weeks a year.
Oh, really? And now these inner-city, latte-sipping, cigar-smoking, Chardonnay-drinking, hoity-toity elitist wharfies want an extra 6%.
I mean, we cannot have the militant end of the union movement effectively engaging in a campaign of extortion. That is just straight-out extortion. It's extortion.
Yes, the PM couldn't emphasise that point enough, though he did give it a good crack. But then a lot of things are extortion when you look at the definition, aren't they? The act of getting something by force or threats. I mean, look at work for the dole. The government gets your labour by threatening to withdraw your welfare payments. Right, government spin surgeon Dremella Burt?
I didn't come here to be a punchline.
That's what you think.
You and everyone else in this little Politburo will be smirking out the other side of your faces once whatever we announced or didn't announce about the ABC last night kicks in.
Well, let's talk about your economic policy of late. Hasn't been so much of a backflip as a triple somersault with a half pike and a double twist.
We've been practising.
Well, in contrast to your criticism of Labor during the GFC, you've now decided it's acceptable for a federal government to spend $314 billion and announce that budget surpluses aren't necessary and that higher levels of government debt are sustainable, so long as you measure them against comparable economies.
Do you have a question, or are you doing a TED Talk?
Well, my question is, why is racking up massive government debt suddenly now OK?
Well, it's not OK, Shaun. It's terrible.
But you're allowed to do it.
Absolutely. But the Coalition are very concerned about that debt, particularly as it's the younger generation who are going to have to repay it.
Why do they have to repay it?
Because they're the ones who'll be working and paying tax long after you've been locked up in one of Richard Colbeck's Soylent Green factories.
Yes, but given industries with the biggest proportion of young workers have been hardest hit and young Australians are in danger of having lower living standards than their parents and the wealth of households for those under 35 has barely moved since 2004 and older households generally pay substantially less tax on the same income as young people, those young people are not going to have the money to repay the debt. Given the concentration of wealth amongst older Australians, why couldn't you ask them to contribute a little more?
Shaun, if you want older Australians to pay more tax, ask them yourself. They're your viewers.
That's right. She went there.
Look, our government might be corrupt, but we're not stupid. We're hardly about to impose higher taxes on Australians to repair the budget.
Well, so the 2% temporary deficit levy you introduced back in 2014, which targeted the wealthy to reduce the budget deficit, wasn't a tax?
Of course not. It was a levy.
What's the difference?
Well, a coalition government would never impose a tax.
But you're allowed to impose a levy?
Absolutely.
Labor, of course, have a right of budget reply and wasted no time laying into the government, with Anthony Albanese in particular sharpening up his claws and taking a few swipes at the PM even before the budget was out and displaying a wit not seen, in this correspondent's opinion, since the glory days of Bill Shorten. For example, he said, and I quote, "The Morrison government is always there for the photo op, never there for the follow-up. Once the Nikon stops clicking, the Prime Minister nicks off." And that's not bad. Photo op, follow-up, nick on, nick off, that's pretty damn good. So look out, Prime Minister, they're coming after you with puns. Like we can talk. Although I do think Albo missed an opportunity when he said he was blaming him for the Morrison recession, which surely should have been referred to as the Morricession. These are just some ideas for Albo. It's in my ABC contract to help him as much as possible. Although, to be honest, Albo doesn't need a professional comedian who does it for a living to tell him what to do. He's that good. Have a look at this very impressive 1-2 punch. The first hit over the government's manufacturing package.
The only thing that Scott Morrison has managed to manufacture in his time in government is announcements.
Wham! Followed up by his right hook on DFAT's accidental disclosure of private email addresses.
The 1,000 emails have been lost, just as the government has been lost all over the place when it comes to getting home the 27,000 stranded Australians.
Pow! And the fact that he got it wrong when he said the emails were lost, when what happened was the emails were actually made accessible to thousands of people who shouldn't have seen them, the opposite of lost, doesn't make it any less funny, does it? If you've got it, you've got it. And by the way, Albo, when your material's as good as yours, don't be surprised when it gets ripped off.
The problem with this government is that they're always there for the photo op and they're not there for the follow-up.
Yeah, she hasn't got it. Quip Gay Friendly from Labor-aligned activist group with a focus on manners. Get up, please. Firstly, on energy policy, I realise there are many diverse views on the best way forward for the country. On the one side, you've got Labor's Joel Fitzgibbon, and on the other side, you've got Labor's Mark Butler. That's a big problem, isn't it?
Oh, well, I suppose it's always better to have dissenters inside the tent pissing out rather than outside the tent pissing in, Shaun.
Yeah, but Joel Fitzgibbon is inside the tent pissing inside. And in fact, taking a dump on everyone else's sleeping bags, isn't he? I mean, how are you going to manage these core differences of opinion?
What I'd say about the government, Shaun, is that they're basically competent. They've dropped ideology in favour of pragmatism. They're putting money into people's pockets. It's really disappointing. I mean, what are we supposed to do with that? They're not giving us any oxygen, Shaun. In fact, now they're talking about giving us hydrogen.
You don't seem very optimistic. I mean, if there was an election this weekend, would you encourage people to vote Labor?
Yeah, if they want. There's not, is there?
No, it's just hypothetical. But right now, to take us to the break, a little bit of madness for you.
Excuse me, Shaun. Excuse me.
Oh, yes, lady who usually interrupts me.
Me?
Yeah.
Yes, I think the Coalition should be criticised here for failing to appreciate the long-term benefits of Labor's original NBN proposal.
What, people working from home?
No, herd immunity.
Yeah.
If we'd built the NBN like the ALP wanted in the first place, we could have already exposed millions of Australians to 5G, thereby creating herd immunity to the coronavirus. Now, who knows how long it will take? And if you think you know how long, send your entries to NBN at a secure address and you could be in the running to win a lifetime supply of war-on-waste disposable coffee cups made from durable, non-biodegradable polystyrene. These cups will be around long after you've thrown them away, so the sustainability message lasts. That is nice.
Imagine what it would be like to go back in time and live as ancient ancestors did.
Back before paleo, or even the Paleozoic era, before man or even primates had evolved, where life forms were primitive. And if you weren't an apex predator, you might even have found yourself on the menu.
Boiled trilobite. Again?
If you were a prehistoric eel, you'd have eaten nothing else. Now tuck in.
Meet the Catamoles. Dad's a hedge fund manager and arsehole, and Mum is an anti-vaxxer who's addicted to Gogglebox and OxyContin.
How long again until I evolve from a unicellular organism and get to leave the primordial pool?
Next week. Shut up and eat your decomposed lichen.
6 weeks, 150 million years from protozoa to pterodactyl.
More trilobite, anyone? Otherwise, you'll have to eat your young.
Way back in time for dinner. Ironically, coming soon.
And the whole family are pterodactyls. It's a parody of Back in Time for Dinner with, what's her name?
I like it.
And then we come back from the break and I'm explaining the sketch idea to you. Oh, hi, I'm just running a few ideas past Ita. Of course, Ita, if you're not keen, we can get Emily to do an impression of you.
Absolutely not.
Well, things are hotting up in the kitchen, and to see what the finalists are plating up, let's cross over to Ellen and Julia.
Thanks, Shaun. So, what are you guys serving us tonight?
Well, Julia, if you like your porridge cold and spicy, you're in for a disappointment because I've prepared aged flathead, mottled with many flags of all nations, recumbent in a shallow puddle of virgin born-again olive oil. Now, you can use WD-40 or lard. There's no safe word in our kitchen, eh, boys?
Well, we did try using the word banana, but that got confusing if we were making things with bananas.
And what's for pudding?
Well, Ellen, it's a real throwback and up to my childhood. My cousins and I would each have birthdays every year, and my mother would always make frogs in a pond with actual frogs. But tonight, I've used some slightly off Chiquitos to make what I call turds in a pool.
And for afters, Casper, a bit of a surprise.
I'll say live mice. You can cook them if you want, but I think that's cruel. Shaun!
Thank you, Ellen, and thank you, Julia. Well, coming up, finance and the market reaction to the latest economic forecasts. And our special report on the $60 painting that could be worth tens of millions of dollars. I assume because the government is going to buy it to build the new Sydney airport on it. Now, last week on the show, we mentioned that there may be shortages at Christmas time due to the restrictions on supply chain operations in Victoria. And thanks to Chairman Dan here and his mad obsession with keeping people alive, this means the cost of fruit and vegetables could double by Christmas. Does this mean we might have to go without our usual Christmas overabundance fruit and veg farmer Claudio Milk?
Yes, unfortunately, Shaun, this year there won't be enough for there to be too much to go around.
Why the hat?
Keeps the sun off.
Oh, you're having to pick your own produce yourself?
Well, no, but I do ride around the property assessing my losses for tax purposes, but even that's difficult without backpackers to carry my sedan chair. Of course, the real tragedy is that this holiday season many Australians will be going to bed feeling merely too full instead of bursting.
Is there nothing we can do?
Without enough people to pick, our spinach is wilting away on the plant.
But wouldn't that happen anyway in our fridges? So in a way, we're cutting out the middleman.
It's not just the garnishes, Shaun, it's all the vegetables that people cook too much of and throw out anyway. If we can't get the product off into the shops, then families will miss out.
What if families just had their Christmases out on the farm?
Well, then they could eat the vegetables directly off the plant like livestock. Then, when they're fattened up, I can have them corralled, stick them in a truck, ship them off to be slaughtered. Humanely, of course, within reason, taking into account the cost of pneumatic bolts, and then get them processed into patties, and hey presto, we've all got enough high-protein meat product to eat come the end of the year, and it's 100% Australian product, assuming they have their citizenship papers.
You think your customers will be OK with cannibalism?
Oh, the usual latte-sipping, kale-munching green left will probably kick up a stink about the murder side of things, but you can't afford to be too ethical when you're hungry. I mean, we're all human, and you are what you eat, so it all balances out in the end.
Well, until the government rolls back the red tape on the eating of human flesh, though, we have to look at other options. Our Agriculture Minister, David Littleproud, last week asked the all-important question, how do we incentivise people, particularly those on youth allowance, to get a leg in? Leg in? Presumably means leg up. I mean, you put your foot in, as in the door, or your mouth, but you don't put your leg in unless you're doing the hokey-pokey. Fortunately, Nationals leader Michael McCormick was on hand to clarify, saying...
They can pick fruit, shear our sheep and fall in love.
So regardless of whether you want to get your leg in, a leg up or your leg over, the government wants you to do it in rural Australia. The big question, of course, is how. Because for many of us, for as long as we can remember, we have been taught that as much as we might love eating fruit, we shouldn't give in to the temptation of picking it. And although some farmers have been pilloried for exploiting fruit pickers with low wages and substandard living conditions, the Deputy PM is right behind those exploitative farmers.
We abhor anybody who does the right thing by young people, backpackers, whatever the case might be, as far as conditions of living, as far as paying the right wages, as far as doing the right thing.
Finally, someone from that side of politics admits they're anti-worker. But despite abhorring those who pay fruit pickers properly, Big Mac issued a rallying cry to Australia's youth.
Have a go. Come to regional Australia. Bring your mobile, have that Instagram moment, because they're, up a ladder, picking fruit, blue sky in the background, wonderful country breeze, wonderful friends around. You'll find more friends. You might find the love of your life out in regional Australia.
Or you might be murdered by a maniac like in Wolf Creek. But that could be an Instagram moment too. The Maxter went on to lament the limitations of the government in this regard.
We can't force people to take these jobs. We can't actually herd people onto buses and transport them there.
So, a gaping legislative loophole for the Attorney-General to fix there. But the Mac Meisterino is serious about all this.
But we jolly well will make sure that there are incentives for them to do so.
And you know he means business when he uses offensive language like jolly well. The big takeaway, though, from Mick Mac Paddywhack is that...
It's time for Australians to get back to work.
Media advisor to the Deputy PM, Byro Prance, is he calling us dole bludgers?
Oh, well, through JobKeeper and JobSeeker, Shaun, the government's been very generous in sharing taxpayers' money with the taxpayers, but you've had your little lie-in. Now it's time to get up, get out from under the doona, stand on your own 2 feet, put your underpants on or have a shower. We're not going to be prescriptive about the order in which you do things of a morning. As Michael said many times, people's personal hygiene practices are nobody's business but their own. And when it comes to your own business or even someone else's, it's time to open up again. Not in an emotional sense, divulging your deepest, darkest fears. No one wants to hear about that, but rather in a trading sense, whereby you get back to work having had your shower in your underpants. And I don't mean you've had your shower in your underpants, although, again, your choice. You may have privacy concerns relating to concealed cameras in your bathroom. And as Michael has said many times, cameras in the bathroom means video on the internet. But have your shower in whatever state of undress you prefer. Have your breakfast, whether it be bacon and eggs, a muesli, a smoothie, a crumpet, grilled spam.
Sadly, we leave Byro there in order to fit the rest of the show in.
Soldiers or tongue, liver.
To some breaking news now, courtesy of Channel 7.
Top-of-the-line TVs, fridges and washing machines are being sold for half price or more to savvy buyers looking in the right places.
Half price or more, so maybe even full price. Oh, yeah, got to get me some of that.
This Sunday, the pub's been vandalised again. The locals are angry and they want answers. Midsummer Nuclear Holocausts, Sunday, 8:33, followed by the gratingly tedious Robespierre and Prickleberry.
Welcome back. Well, how will we look back on the times we're experiencing now? Will it be the defining moment that brought humanity together? Will we sing tedious songs about it? Or will it wipe us out, and will a new and alien life form dig through our landfill and put the more interesting bits in a museum? These are questions to be tackled by the wisdom of our future elders.
Dehydrated kale spread?
No, thank you.
Yes, I don't blame you.
Sup, Pacific Sector. I'm the Descendo clone of Francis Greenslade 1 with the kill gene removed. 60 of your Earth years ago, corn virus ravaged your world, and Bill...
Yes?
You were there to witness its shenanigans.
Yes, well, of course, in those days, we called it the virus. Of course, you can't say that anymore.
Beijing will just bleep that out automatically.
It was a time of great upheaval, of course, and our Lord, Pete Evans, blessed be his name, began his ministry in the following year, and only a few months later was shot out of a cannon into the sun. And back then, of course, Francis, left-wing and right-wing people all lived on the same planet. So you can imagine it was like oil and water.
Yeah, I don't know what either of those two things are.
But we were cured, and Pete Evans, blessed be his name, was forgiven of all his past weirdness.
Tell us about when corn virus did happen to Earth.
Oh, it was awful. Yes, we went from a people who spent their lives watching Netflix at home and ordering Uber Eats and internet shopping and having anxiety, to a people who still did all those things, but for a reason. I was an Instagram influencer at the time, in a polycule with a gender non-conforming sapiosexual and a triumvirate of panoramic aces, and it really did a number on us.
Yes, I think you're going to have to explain to our audience what an Instagram is.
Oh, yes, certainly. It's the equivalent of an Insta 0.03 ounce.
Baffling.
Yes. Can I show you something that was so very much a part of our lives all those years ago?
If you must.
Come along with me, won't you? Bloody NBN. Still not working, you see. That's the joke.
I got it.
Yep.
Yes. Well, coming up before Utopia to let us know what's happening later in the week.
Tomorrow night on ABC and iView at 8:30 on The Bronwyn Bishop Show, Christopher Pine reads extracts from the Royal Automobile Club magazine. Then it's Outback Stationery, How to Draw a Pancreas, and Focus on Parsnips.
Well, that's all for what we hope was a politically correct, gender-inclusive and culturally diverse season of Mad as Hell. But, as they say, it's not over till the fat the lady sings. Now, I know it's been a tough year. Yes, the economy is dead, hit by a truck on the highway of life. A truck driven by a microscopic organism, which meant it probably couldn't see over the wheel. But there is a way back for us all, and fortunately we have a government that knows how to bring us back by 2030 to where we were this time last year, on our way to a recession anyway. We wanted to end on an optimistic note. Here are several of them, arranged into a song, our message of hope to you.
Under the arc of weather-stained boards, ancient goblins and warlords come out the ground, not making a sound. The smell of death is all around. And the night when the cold wind blows, no one cares, nobody knows. I don't want to be buried in a pet cemetery. I don't want to live my life again. I don't want to be buried in a pet cemetery. I don't want to live my life again.
Follow Josh to the sacred place. This ain't a dream and I can't escape. Molars and fangs, the clicking of bones. Colbeck moans among the tombstones. And the night when the moon is bright, someone cries, something ain't right. I don't want to be buried in a pet
giant baby.
Fish are biting and the beers are cold.